Welcome to another episode of On This Day on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I am your host for On This Day, Mike Goodpaster, and today we're going to talk about February the 24th, 1980, 40 years ago today. And it was a Sunday morning 40 years ago today, and it's a Sunday morning I will always remember as the U.S. was battling Finland for an Olympic gold medal. The game was played at 11 o'clock in the morning. I still remember getting up, watching a game with my dad, and it is still, I'm a hockey fan, but I'm a hockey fan because of this game. And even though I'm probably more of a baseball, football, basketball, boxing fan, this is still the greatest sports moment I have ever witnessed. And you didn't have to be a hockey fan to tune into your television set on ABC at 11 a.m. on that Sunday morning 40 years ago. You didn't even have to be a sports fan for that matter. If you were just an American who wanted to see something magical and inspiring, you made an appointment with your TV that morning because you knew the greatest of all underdogs had a chance to do something remarkable in a tiny village in Lake Placid, New York. Now, the United States team was a collection of 20 college and former college hockey players, and they were going to take on Finland that Sunday. And if Coach Herb Brooks' team beat the Finns, it was going to win an Olympic gold medal that no sane person could have confidently predicted before the games even began. 2 nights earlier, in a game watched by millions of Americans on a 3-hour tape delay, Team USA had shocked the world by beating the powerful Soviet Union. This was the same Soviet squad that had beaten NHL All-Stars just a year earlier in the Challenge Cup at Madison Square Garden. This was a team that had won 4 straight Olympic gold medals and had crushed the Americans 10-3 in an exhibition game at Madison Square Garden just a few days before the Lake Placid tournament began. Despite all of those obstacles, the U.S. team won 4-3 on a third-period goal by their captain, Mike Eruzione. Now, they had one more game to win against a very good Finnish team that would have liked nothing more than spoil that party. And one of the best things about the USA-Finland game on Sunday, February the 24th, 1980, is that Americans were going to get to see it live, including those on the West Coast who had to wake up for an 8 a.m. broadcast. It was much like a Super Bowl. There was a sense that everybody in the country would be watching together. Unlike the present-day Olympic format, when medal round games are played in a playoff-style scenario, the 1980 medal round was essentially a second round robin to accumulate more points. 2 teams emerged from the 2 groups, the Red Division and the Blue Division. The medal round gave the 2 teams from the Red Division a chance to face each other, or face off against a team from the Blue Division. Now, Sweden had edged Team USA based on goal differential for first place in the Blue Division. Now, even though the teams had tied 2-2 in the first game at a round robin 2 weeks before. The Soviets had beaten the Finns 4-2 in a Red Division game on February the 18th. Heading into the medal round, each team was given credit for points earned in these head-to-head games. The Soviets entered the medal round with 2 points in the bank, while the Swedes and Americans each had 1. Finland had nothing. Now, in stunning the Soviets on February the 22nd, Team USA raised its total to 3 points. On that same day, Finland tied Sweden 3-3 going into the final games. The U.S. led the medal round with 3 points. The USSR and Sweden tied for second with 2 points. Finland was third with 1. A win over Finland would give the Americans 5 points, making it impossible for the Soviets or the Swedes to catch them for gold. However, a loss to the Finns would have cost the U.S. a medal, because the winner of the Soviet-Sweden game would end up with 4 points to the Americans' 3. The Finns would have also had 3 points in that scenario, but would have owned a tiebreaker over Team USA, forcing the Americans to settle for bronze at best. The nightmare scenario was a loss to Finland and a Swedish upset of the Soviets, which would have left the Americans out of the medals in 4th place. As such, the Finland-USA game was not the kind of gold medal game we know today, because the Finns were not going to get a silver if they lost. The best they could do was bronze. As it turned out, the U.S. would win this game over the Finns 4-2 in the subsequent Soviet-Sweden game, with the USSR won 9-2, was basically played for silver. And once again, in that small town in New York, 10,000 people rocked the Olympic Fieldhouse, including 1,500 with standing room tickets. Fans were chanting USA, USA from the minute they entered the building. But as had been the case in 5 of their previous 6 games, Team USA would fall behind and have to mount a comeback to win it. Finland scored first on a 50-foot slap shot named Jukka Porovari, who stole the puck from U.S. defenseman Ken Morrow and promptly blasted it past Jim Craig. The lead stood up through one period. The second period wasn't much better for the Americans, although Steve Kristoff managed to tie the score shortly after Team USA killed a penalty to defenseman Mike Ramsey. The Finns needed less than 2 minutes to regain their lead on another power play. With Buzz Snyder in the penalty box for slashing, Finnish forward Mikko Lininen, one of 6 future Rangers players participating in the game, made it a 2-1 score headed into the third period. Between periods, U.S. coach Herb Brooks was livid. He famously told his players that if they didn't find a way to win in the final 20 minutes, they would take the loss to their effing graves. That speech fired up the team, and Phil Vercote came through off an assist from Dave Christian to tie it at 2-2 early in the third period. The eventual game winner came from future Ranger Rob McClanahan, who was set up by Mark Johnson for a 3-2 lead. There was still more than half a period to play, however, and the desperate Finns took advantage of 3 straight USA penalties. They applied heavy pressure on Jim Craig, and Craig stood up to the test. The U.S. scoring leader Johnson scored a shorthanded goal at 16:25 in the third period to make it 4-2 and to give the United States an improbable gold medal. Now, the thing about this, and the thing that makes this really special, and there's a bunch of them, but in terms of USA hockey, the impact of 1980 can't be underestimated. In an era where there were few Americans reaching the NFL, some 12 of the 20 team members would go on to play in hockey's top league, some for longer stretches than others. 4 players, along with Brooks and assistant coach Craig Patrick, would make their way into the Rangers organization, and even those who never played professionally after Lake Placid would have their names more memorable today than many of the NHL players of their generation. The Olympians of 1980 also created an entire generation of young American athletes who chose to pursue hockey over other sports to set the Olympics as a priority. That generation included future NHL stars such as Mike Richter, Brian Leetch, Pat LaFontaine, Ed Olczyk, Tony Granato, and Chris Chelios. It is hard to imagine what the past 30 years of NHL history would have looked like if none of these players had been so driven to pursue their Olympic and professional dreams. And you just know all those kids were watching ABC on that Sunday morning. The other thing that makes this moment so iconic, I mean, number one, I remember watching every game. Now, whether it was the Sweden game or the West Germany game, where they would have live updates on ABC, you'd see bits and pieces. I remember seeing the tying score against Sweden. I think the Swedish game was like a day before the opening ceremonies. But I remember watching these. The Norway game was shown live. And I remember all of this. I remember the Friday they played the Soviets. I remember that day in school in art class, we all drew American flags to wave while we watched the game. And you get home at 3:30, and once we got to 5 o'clock, no TV was on in my room, no radio. I remember my parents watched a big TV in the living room, which of course was huge. It was gigantic. It was 19 inches. And I remember sitting in my room at 8 o'clock when Al Michaels comes on to call that game with Ken Dryden. I didn't know who won. And I sat there with the little flag I'd drawn. I was like 10 or 11 years old. And I chanted USA at the TV for 2.5 hours. And I still remember every second of that. I mean, like I said, I'm a hockey fan, but not like I am a fan of other sports. And what made this moment so special, and which makes it so you can never see a moment like this again, are the circumstances for this to be legendary were unparalleled. I mean, you had the Iran hostage situation, you had the economy was tanking, and it wasn't so great to be an American anymore. But this country, on a sheet of ice in Lake Placid, gave people to be proud, a reason to be proud to be Americans again. And if you look at the most iconic moments in sports history, Ali Frazier, what made that so special could never happen again. You know, the issues surrounding Ali, the Vietnam War, Louis Schmeling, World War II. Now, maybe someday there will be another moment like this, but I don't think there has been since, and I don't think there ever will be. So, on this day, February the 24th, 1980, the United States hockey team beats Finland to win the Olympic gold medal, and that impossible dream came true. All right, guys, you've been listening to On This Day on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Make sure you follow me at Grueling Truth, and make sure you listen to all of our podcasts, which you can find on any platform, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher. You name it, we're there. But for now, this has been Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.